to look at what some of us who grew up here as a decent city and to see it crumble by the year, it speaks to a larger malaise.
To connect with survivors, many of whom have debilitating injuries, who are still struggling to recover both mentally and physically from the trauma of being in a building collapse.
And he also is demanding that all electronics that was seized during the operation be immediately returned, and that any information that had been made copies of be destroyed.
Behind the big, bold headlines of disaster, corruption and crime emerge the daily experiences of South Africans. And more often than not, there's something genuinely beautiful to talk about. It just takes a keen eye and ear to isolate these wonderful tales amidst the daily doom and gloom. In fact, some of the most read articles on the News24 website over the past month or so have been good news stories. And our good news editor, Paul Herman, is grinning like a Cheshire cat for that very reason.
So this essentially is a rugby profile of a young starlet, right? But when we found out his story, we were like, wow, it started with tragic circumstances, losing both his parents 6 months apart for different reasons. He has to move in with his aunt. They struggle for a bit, but then he gets a rugby scholarship in grade 9. By matric, he's the South African rugby school's captain. He's a hooker. And then this year, as I mentioned, he's playing for the overcame Bulls, made the junior Springboks. I mean, if his career really pans out, you might see him being captain in the actual Springboks.
Later in the show, Joburg Mayor Dana Marrero calls in the bomb squad. But no, it's not Rassie's men. And finally, an iconic Cape Town landmark is simply a bridge too far.
To stay tuned to The Lead for every edition, hit the follow and subscribe buttons on our Spotify, Apple, and YouTube podcast channels.
My name's Graeme Raubenheimer. Let's chat all this and more right here on The Lead on News24. If you look closely enough, there's plenty to celebrate about the South African spirit. Yeah, we're a resilient bunch, but we're friendly, inventive, hardworking, and selfless too. Over the next 20 minutes or so, you'll identify these traits in the good South African news stories that editor Paul Herman and I will talk about. In fact, he's with me now in our Cape Town studios on News24 Open Day to do just that. How's it, Paul? Welcome back to our third edition together on The Lead, talking just good news stories. It's lekker to have you here.
Thanks so much, Graeme. Yeah, I feel like I'm part of the furniture here, third time lucky, and this time we've got some really great stories to speak about that also did really, really well on our platform, so I'm looking forward to diving in.
I'm not privy to the term Open Day here at News24. Tell us what it's all about. If you can just fill in the blanks. It's basically, if you're not a subscriber of News24, you get access to pretty much our full bouquet, right?
That's correct. That's actually the inaugural Open Day. Adrian Basson, our editor-in-chief, gave us a nice explanation all of our social media platforms. You may have seen it. Basically, you can come to News24 today and read all our stories for free. So obviously we have the subscription service where people pay for our journalism. Not all of the journalism is locked. Some of it's free, but today all of it's free. And it's to just give everyone a taste across all of our sections, some of our best work that you can enjoy today.
And fantastic, of course, The Lead on its various platforms, which is Spotify, YouTube, Iono, as well as, I'm missing one, Apple Pod Music, of course, and the News24 website is always open to subscribers. So if you would like to listen to some of the stories that we get to talk about, this is the best way to do it. Really great curated list of stories that we'd spoken about before today's show. Some of it, the most read articles on the News24 website over the last month. Fantastic, shining a light on the goodness that's happening in our country. Let's begin with this one, penned personally by yourself, Paul. It's the headline is "Not Alone, Beloved Editor Battling Cancer, Humbled by 700,000 Rand in Donations, Some from Strangers." Here's the story of Andrew Trench. He's at Vincent Blotti Hospital. His life gets essentially turned upside down. He gets the word that he's got stage 4 cancer. His medical costs, his medical aid's not covering the massive expense that's coming with this life-changing news. And then BackaBuddy, of course, comes into play, and he's suddenly getting the kindness of strangers across the globe. What a fantastic story.
Yes, I mean, look, this story was the first last week out of 3 to make it into that most read tab on News24, for those that would have noticed it. But it started quietly. It was just another story like all the others. And then over 3 or 4 days, it just started gaining momentum. I think what resonates with Andrew's story is just the idea of him being declined by his medical aid. I think a lot of people found that to be, when you need it the most, you needed help. He didn't have it from an insurer, but
that's the phenomenon the world over, right? That's the sentiment. Like we're being failed by our medical aids not being able to cover these costs.
He basically told me he's resigned himself, that he's probably going to die after getting that news. But then he decided he can't give up just like that. He launched this thing called Andrew's Fighting Chance, Back a Buddy, Facebook. And on the first day, he raised like R250,000 mostly from friends. But then something started happening after that, is that he started getting donations from people in Norway and people in Sweden. And I think people just relate to the cancer story. They relate to that need of being helped. There was this idea of Ubuntu coming through and people just wanting to see someone beat the odds, especially in light of that disappointment of not being able to cover it through his medical aid. So that really is what made it newsworthy for us. This idea of like, a story almost became bigger than him. He had like over 600 people donating, raising all this money for him. He still has a way to go, but they're running runs for him, they're doing swims for him. And for some reason, News24 readers and outside News24 caught onto it as well and made it one of the top read stories of last week.
And one of the quotes by Andrew quoted in the story, he says, "On the first day of trying to fundraise, my wife came home from work, collapsed from tears, and this time not from grief or sadness, but overwhelmed by the sheer generosity of people." And this particular comment from one of the readers, "So sad that medical aid companies actually just don't care. God bless you, Andrew." It's fantastic that we could get such a groundswell of responses here. Any update as to Andrew's story at this stage? Has he given you an indication of where the fundraising's at, Paul?
So I think he's heading towards the 1 million mark soon. I mean, he's got a way to go. The worst case scenario he has to raise over 3 million rand there's a special drug he has to use called Keytruda, I believe the words, or Keytruda. So he's getting there. Like I said, people in his neighborhood are doing this thing called the ribbon run. And then in Norway, a whole bunch of, I think they either related to family or they journalists, they did the ribbon run. People in Norway did a ribbon run for Andrew Trench all the way in South Africa. It's quite crazy to see that people genuinely want to assist others when they feel that it's worthy. So he's got a way to go, but he's starting his treatment with the money he's got already. And in a best case scenario, he might not need to go all the way, but he's still trying to fundraise. So if you feel like this is something that speaks to you, feel free to read his story.
Absolutely. And staying with medical matters, and this was a story that was in actual fact one of our part of our And Finally segments in a previous edition of The Lead. The headline is, "This woman is walking from Joburg to Cape Town to raise awareness of husband's rare disease," also penned by yourself, Paul. It tells the story of Sean. He's struggling with a very rare Durkheim's disease, a lot of pain that he has to go through every single day of his life. Lipomas essentially is what it comes down to, these fatty tissue lumps all over his body. It's basically brought him to a wheelchair. He can't do a lot in his life. And his wife, Nicole, says, "I want to start this 45-day walk across the country." She wants to raise awareness for the disease. What's the update been like that and the response to that story?
Yeah, she's been... so once again, this is another story where we do stories like this from time to time. People are doing amazing things. We had those 3 boys from Limpopo cycling down all the way down to Cape Town. People were interested in that in TikTok. This lady is trying to raise funds and awareness for her husband's rare disease. She wants to find a cure. Durkheim's disease doesn't have a cure. So she decided she's just going to do this thing. She's been preparing for a few months. And I think News24 wrote the story for the first time. We were the first media house to cover her. For some reason, that story too just suddenly got picked up by readers, and within the second day, it also made the most read tab. I think what's rare here is that she's walking from Joburg to Cape Town. She says, "I'm not a runner. I'm not built for running," which many of us can sort of relate to. But she's decided, "I'm going to do this to help raise awareness," and she's documenting it all on TikTok. So since we published that story, I think TikTok followers jumped from 3,000. She's raising money on 2 different platforms.
Oh, wow.
I think that's also on like maybe 10,000 Rand. And she sends me the odd update and video. So when she gets gets to Bloem, halfway there, we're going to do an update with her. And then when she gets to Cape Town, we're going to go and meet her for a final leg of the story. But I just like that story because it's not really attached to any big news item, you know. It's just a singular story about this woman and her struggles with her family. She's doing something rare and people have responded to it. So that's nice to see.
Yeah, she was inspired, as I see, by the TikTok star Gum Suzuki, who was also in South Africa, right, at the time. And I know that he came to speak to some of the media, whatever. But she says, obviously, she's doing it, obviously to raise awareness for Durkheim's disease. And anybody can join her along her walk, right?
That's exactly it. She said anyone who's interested along the route, she's taking the N1, the normal route from Joburg to Cape Town. And we've had emails, people from Bloem, people along the way saying, we want to meet with her, we want to donate socks to her, we want to walk with her even for a kilometer or two. If this is something you feel resonates with you, then please feel free. She's open to everything. She has a safety vehicle traveling with her. Her best friend Babelo is with her, as well as her boer doggy called Zaza. So you might see her along the way, but also really just follow her story on TikTok as well. That's where her handle is Nicole Telegram. You can find it in our News24 story.
Yeah, man, it's unbelievable what we can do with social media these days, getting so much awareness for these things. Let's sort of stay with the medical sort of theme at the moment. There was another story written by our colleague Apalele Mbokoto, Gift of Life. Kernzy, college deputy head, donates kidney to former pupil. Talks about Justin Fletcher. He's a Cape Townian. He's battling this chronic kidney disease, but then he received a life-saving kidney transplant from his former housemaster at Michael House, Mark Ancelotti. A very dear story close to my heart as well. My mom gave one of her kidneys to my late brother Lloyd. And in this case, Mark and Justin hadn't seen each other for a really, really long time. They had lost sort of contact along the way. And then to hear about his story in the local sort of official letter for Michael House, Mark comes along as his former housemaster and basically gives him the gift of life. That's incredible.
I mean, we found the story to be incredibly rare. I mean, many of us would give up organs for family members and that sort of thing. But this was a student, a former pupil and a teacher, obviously had a good relationship, lost contact over the years. And then I think Mark Ancelotti saw the newsletter and just thought, how can I help? And then took the decision to, if you need a kidney to help you so that you don't die, I'm going to go on the 1 year long process of preparing for that for you. And so they sort of reconnected, they became close, and it's just a really touching story that I think brought the Michael House community together as well around it as well. There's lots of praise within that community, lots of chatter about it, but it's just really rare. I mean, an incredibly act of kindness. Yes.
Yeah, there's 10 years difference between them. So Mark, for example, is 54 and Justin, the kidney recipient, is 44. They said that they went through a lot of difficulties in the run up to the operation, right? So there were some sort of things that happened along the way in preparation for that, the ancillary costs that came from all of that, right?
Yeah, that's correct. But I think they've been fundraising as well, and I think all sorts of people in the Michael House community have coming to the fore as well. But our journalists actually spoke to them while they were recovering and while they were in hospital. They were in chipper mood. They're
very jokey. They make a lot of jokes with the two of them, right? There's a good friendship there.
Yeah, exactly. I think they met. He was a postgrad, so I think he was 20 years old, and they were probably of a similar age. So it was more like a friendship from the start.
Sure.
So I mean, they're in chipper mood despite having to go through this process. And we'll probably check in with him in a few weeks just to find out how things are going.
Absolutely. When you look at today's economy, how people are struggling to get by, things are only getting more expensive. Thankfully, we dodged a 0.5% VAT increase. Yeah, this incredible story comes on News24. It had the whole office talking, the newsroom talking, how I turned my 350 Rand SASSA grant into a growing vegetable garden business, penned by yourself, Paul, with our colleague Chelsea Ogilvie. Nicky Jafter used his 350 Rand unemployment grant. He planted just a few seeds in his garden at his Kraaifontein home, and from there he's now essentially selling it to suppliers, basically, some even in Namibia. Incredible. He's created a new lease of life for himself.
Yeah, it was a lovely Workers' Day feature. I mean, look, Nicky Jafter's story has been in the news before. Other outlets have covered him. It's not the first time his story has been noted. But we felt, I haven't seen a video of him, so I wanted to go down and actually, that's a visual story, absolutely, right? So yeah, he started out small with his SASSA grant. He would buy a few seeds. He had a 10 meter by 30 meter patch in his yard, planted a few pumpkins. And now I think it's 5 years later, he said he's got 100 by 100 meter plot, which is an acre, and he's expanding into 2. He's already done all the plowing and all of that sort of things. But it was just beautiful going there. We went there, it was like serene and idyllic. There was beetroot, there was lemons, there was onions, many of it was packaged on his table. It's not a huge business, right? It's a small business. He sells to people in his community via WhatsApp, and then he's got what he calls agents, people that come and buy a few produce, they take it back to Grabo, or they send it to Namibia, right? So it's not like a huge business, but relative to his costs and what he does, it's just a lovely sort of small business out of nothing, essentially. And I think we had 74 comments on that story, and by far, like 90% of it was all positive. And I think people just love the enterprise when someone does something like this in the area that they are in an unexpected place.
I also love the story about his son buying him a shirt when he sort of turned 61, Nikki's Garden. It's such a lovely touch, and of course some of the beautiful pictures and the video coming out of there. Love the story as well, from the garden to the sports field, also by our colleague Apelele Mbokoto, orphaned at 12, supported by many, how Siphosethu Mnebelele became a junior Springbok. He basically lost both his parents at the age of 12. Despite that, goes on to get a scholarship at a top school, has to live with his aunt who has to take in him and his siblings, but then becomes this fantastic rugby star, now joining the junior Springboks as a top hooker there, inspired by Sio Khaleesi to also start a foundation. Really incredible to see that. This could be our next sort of Sio Khaleesi. Who knows, Paul?
I was chatting to Apelele when she did this story. I mean, she went down to the, is it KES, King Edward Easter
Correct.
Rugby Festival, and she met this guy there. He was in a matriculant last year. Now he's 19. He's been drafted into the Blue Bulls, Overcame Bulls, and made the junior Springbok side. I think they're playing at present. So this essentially is a rugby profile of a young starlet, right? But when we found out his story, we were like, wow, it started with tragic circumstances, losing both his parents 6 months apart for different reasons. He has to move in with his aunt. They struggle for a bit, but then he gets a rugby scholarship in grade 9. By matric, he's the South African rugby school's captain. He's a hooker. And then this year, as I mentioned, he's playing for the Vodacom Bulls, made the junior Springboks. I mean, if his career really pans out, you might see him being captain in the actual Springboks. But it was just a lovely story of like sort of determination, but also the sacrifices of the people around him that supported him. You know, his aunt, then the people at King Edward, the school, then everyone that came. He's got a family called the Gordons that really took him under their wing while he was at high school, really helped him as well. So it's really a village coming together to help possibly someone who could become a future leader in the rugby space. We'll have to watch the space. But right now he's playing for the junior Springboks, and you can follow that all on Sport 24.
Fantastic. From the sports field then to the kitchens, closer to home here in Cape Town. Love the story about, he's now sort of a head chef, Nathan Clark, but he had humble beginnings starting out in Mitchell's Plain. He talks about in this particular piece with the headline, he grew up never having tried fine dining. Now this head chef's just won Rising Star, also penned by you, Paul. And Nathan talks about coming from his home-cooked meals with his aunties. He would never think that one day he would still, become a fine dining sort of head chef. I love this. It's sort of kind of got an element of rags to riches in its own way. Through the test kitchen within Woodstock and all the rest, he goes on to become this fantastic sort of head chef, and now dreams of having his own restaurant, right?
Yeah, another great one. He's been profiled by our colleagues at News24 Food, but what I was interested in is what was his original story going back to the past. So the news hook is that in March he won Eat Out's Rising Star of the Year, right? And he's the head chef at the Test Kitchen Fledglings. But really, he started out in Mitchell's Plain. His father was in prison. He was raised by his aunts, ate their food. His entire life revolved around Mitchell's Plain. The real big break was joining up with Luke Dale Roberts at the Test Kitchen Fledglings. What they do is that they give people like that a chance without the necessarily culinary skills, and there's like a path for them over many years. They call it a slow simmer with some cooking courses here. You start at the bottom of the rung, you work your way up. And he obviously showed a lot of talent. He's been doing this for 12 years now. And 2 years ago, I believe he was promoted to head chef and just won Rising Star. So it's just a nice story of proteges and mentors helping someone who might not have gotten the break somewhere else, but through hard work, many years, learning the basics, learning the industry from stars, has been able to become a star himself.
What I love so funny about this particular story is how he says his favorite food is like pizza and fries. Like he's like, and somebody was tuning him like, maybe like lay off that for a little while. And he's like, no, I love it, you know?
These top chefs are so interesting. I mean, obviously, it's part of their craft. So many of them will have those sort of like, just like us, you know, you want to have a burger, you want to have a pizza from time to time. They are no different. But their craft and love goes into their skill in creating these courses. And for them, I think it's really about giving diners an experience. So it isn't just food, it's more than that. And I think that's what they love to do. But you know what? Who wouldn't mind some pizza and fries every now and again? If it's good enough for them, it's good enough for you and me, Graeme.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And then ending off, this is such a strange story because it could be, you know, the story for many of us and we just don't know it, right? Headline is how Cape Town woman 90 found her dad who had once lived down the street from her, penned by our colleague Tammy Peterson. Tells the story about Louisa Lawrence. She didn't really know what happened to her father, but she was told as a kid here in Cape Town that her father had died. She didn't ask any more questions other than that, and she took that as sort of the final word. But later on, down the course of her life, her son then takes up wanting to find out a little bit more about her ancestry. Of course, in today's day and age, you can send a DNA test off and you can find out what really happened. Without giving away too much, what does the story eventually reveal, Paul?
So this was penned by our excellent journalist Tammy Peterson. Many of you will know her work, but she just found this lovely story. I mean, I think she heard about it being broadcast somewhere, and she decided she wanted to go deeper. Basically, this woman, through the ancestry testing, has been able to trace some of her relatives, because, you know, they match you with different people all over the globe. And she found her half-brother in New Zealand. So at the end of the story, one of those things is she's going to be reunited with this person eventually. It's just a nice sort of way. It's a family coming back together and someone finding out a little bit more about themselves through the marvels of modern technology. And ancestry testing seems to be like all the rage. My wife wants to do it as well, and she's also gotten quite a few. It tells you your percentages of what regions of the world your family are from. So lovely story. Give it a read. Tammy's excellent at what she does, and this was a really nice, quirky, good news story that she could add to her repertoire.
And then Louisa goes on to say that she, in actual fact, lived with what she didn't know was her dad on Strand Street of Woodstock at about the same time, about 70 years ago. And then she laughs with Tammy, saying basically like, you know, we could have bumped into each other, walked past him, you know. Incredible, huh?
Absolutely incredible. And it probably wouldn't have been unearthed except now when we have like the expertise to do such things. So really just a lovely story about finding yourself.
Absolutely. What else can we look forward to from the Good News Desk today as we sort of ring out the rest of Open Day on News24?
Sure, it's Open Day. We have 2 stories for you. This afternoon, we will have a story about a 16-year-old hockey star from the small town, I think it's called Foreshore in Mpumalanga. She's against the odds has made the South African under-16 hockey girls team, you know, and she's the only one from, I think, a little region in the world. Sure. She doesn't have the funds to get there, raised by a single parent. She's being backed by a sports organization to help her with fundraising. She wants to go and compete in the Netherlands in October. So that's a beautiful little profile of who she is and what she does.
It's unbelievable that there's so many stories like this in South Africa.
Graeme, since we took up this beat 6 months ago now in December, these stories are hiding in plain sight. They're everywhere, and we just needed to like see them. And we're finding more and more people as we do more of these stories, and as they become more read and successful, that more and more people have actually said, we're doing something similar. So this is a great story. She's a rising star. She's made the South African team. Just needs a little bit of help to help achieve something that she wouldn't otherwise do.
And the other one on the agenda?
So our story this morning was about a man named Adam Forgan. He's battling stage 4 cancer, right? He's going through chemotherapy in hospitals in the Western Cape. During his time during chemotherapy, the children's pediatric chemo ward is next door, and he heard like laughter and, just really encouraging courage from kids going through the same thing he's going through. So he decided in the midst of his cancer, he's going to run out the Oteniko half marathon to raise funds for the children right next door in another ward. And so far he's raised 36,000 Rand. So one is that whole thing of, I'm going to run a half. I wouldn't run a half marathon right now, but yeah, he is, and he's got stage 4 cancer, running a half marathon for a great cause. And it's just giving back in the midst of his own trials for children who need it, who've shown laughter in the face of adversity. Lovely story.
Absolutely. And like we said at the beginning of the show, you're going to walk away with many of those tenets of great South African good news stories, which is we're a resilient bunch, we're friendly, we're inventive, we're hardworking, and of course, extremely selfless as well. Paul Herman, thank you so much. Good news editor for chatting to us on News24's Open Day and some of the biggest hits on the most read articles on our website over the past month or so. It's been lekker catching up with you. I always look forward to our chats.
Thank you so much, Graeme. And thanks you to the readers as well. I really, truly hope you've been enjoying the stories. For some reason, the interest in them has grown over the past week and month. So we'll hope to bring more and more of these stories of South Africans doing amazing things around the country.
To our trending topic now, and that's it. Johannesburg Mayor Dada Marero is calling in the bomb squad. No, not Rassie's burly frontline heavyweights, but rather a city-sanctioned team to turn around the city of gold's fortunes. Dr. Snooki Zikalala will, from next month, lead this group of experts to try and slow down the metro's urban decay and speed up service delivery. It'll happen in conjunction with the presidency task team. And Mayor Morero says he's also considering rotating the heads of the various mayoral committees. The DA, though, is pushing for a motion of no confidence in Morero. But Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi says bring it on, claiming there's nothing to panic about. The mayor's even suggesting implementing a state of disaster for crime and lawlessness in Johannesburg to bolster by-law enforcement. And at the same time, declaring war on potholes whilst pushing aggressive revenue collection. Lesufi reckons drastic times call for drastic measures. That reporting on the mayor's State of the City address, thanks to Alex Patrick. And finally, over in Cape Town, the city says its iconic, unfinished Foreshore freeway bridge is proving to be its arch nemesis. Construction got underway in the 1970s, but since then the bridge too far has become a popular spot for film and ad shoots. The city had in recent years commissioned a feasibility study for the bridge's future use, but now acknowledges that there's simply no money for anything to happen. Council's opened a draft budget plan outlining the future development of several pockets of the metro, including District 6, for Cape Townians' comment until Sunday at least. But some of you in the News24 comments section feel that given our current tough economic times, such fanciful projects are probably moot. I wanted to end off with another bridge joke, but I guess one would have been over your head. Lol.
Are you burnt out from the week that was, but need to stay in the news loop? Every Saturday morning at 6, we release The Weekender, a quirky, in-depth look at South Africa and its people. Chock full of exclusive interviews, food, wine, playlists, and opinions, The Weekender is the ultimate segue into Saturday, right here on News24.
Looking for even more political intrigue? Well, this month's free audiobook for News24 subscribers is Being There by former DA leader turned ambassador Tony Leon. In it, he reveals how his successor Helen Zille helped keep the Democratic Alliance in the government of national unity. That's despite its early clashes with the ANC over, among other things, cabinet positions. Have a listen from one of his chapters.
Friday's vote in Parliament for Ramaphosa's re-election as president, like the provincial votes for the ANC's Panyaza Lesufi as Premier of Gauteng, and the IFP's Tami Ntuli as Premier of KwaZulu-Natal, was based on an agreement. Yet its last-minute provisions will allow much scope for manoeuvring in terms of seats, both in number and influence, at a cabinet table still being designed.
Well, from terrible unfinished bridge puns to the best bouquet of good news stories, that's been our week on The Lead, and we hope you enjoyed every second, especially on News 24 Open Day. If you'd like to mail us in the meantime, send us your voice notes, any comments as you will. You can do so on all the various platforms, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and you can mail us, thelead@24.com. Editions will be dropping Monday to Thursday like clockwork at 7 p.m. next week. My name's Graeme Raubenheimer, and so long as there's good news, we'll have The Lead.